Welcome to Bad Actors, the Armis cybersecurity podcast and go-to guide for cutting-edge insights and information. I am your host, Rebecca Craddock. As you can see, we're somewhere different today. The wonderful Armis builders have built a brand new studio at RSA 2025 in San Francisco. I'm really pleased to welcome my next guest. He is the Director of Critical Infrastructure Solutions at Illumio, the leader in breach containment solutions. Trevor Dearing, welcome to Bad Actors.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Now, for our guests and for our audience and studio listeners, we've known each other for a very long time.
We have.
A lot has changed in that time. We used to work together at Juniper Networks.
Yeah.
We're at RSA this week. Lots and lots and lots of discussions about AI, critical infrastructure. This is your specialism. This is what you lead at Illumio. So start by telling me a little bit about Illumio. What do they do and how do they help organizations?
Yes, as you said, we're focused really on breach containment. And that's all about improving resilience for organizations. Because, casting my mind back the years to when we used to work together, and security was basically antivirus, firewalls, a bit of, SSL, a few things like this, which are really focused on keeping the bad guys out. I think what's happened over the years is that we've realized that you're never ever going to keep them out. So what you have to do is start to focus on how do we reduce the impact when they get in? And that's all about identifying risk and being able to then contain that attack. And that's really what breach containment's about.
And in terms of the solutions and the products that you have at Illumio, how do you help organizations specifically do that?
Fundamentally, what it's doing is it is building policy. So we build a policy that we enforce on the host or the asset or the resource itself. And fundamentally what that allows you to do is to apply much more control. So think of it like if someone breaks into your house, God forbid, but they are effectively contained in the room the first room they get in, and they can't get past that. So what that actually does is you're sort of saying, okay, I know what my most critical assets are. If you're an electricity company, it's the grid. And what you're trying to do is to prevent them reaching that. So by being able to enforce on each of the individual resources, it means you have much more control over where they can go, what they can see, what exploits they can use, and things like that.
And what is that, every vertical that you operate in, or do you specialize in specific ones?
No, it includes, so it's Windows, it's Linux, some of the more legacy things like AIX and Solaris, container environments, cloud environments, endpoints, and one of the things that Armis is doing as well, that we're doing together, is working with organizations like NVIDIA, so we can actually enforce on the interface card.
And industry-wise, this is across medical, operational technology, like manufacturing and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, we started in the industry really focused on, our first customers were the major banks.
Okay. Oh,
and that was
services,
for things like PCI compliance, SWIFT compliance. That then moved into healthcare around HIPAA and all of those sort of things. But it's gradually expanded. So, the more critical the infrastructure, the more likely they are to be an early adopter of this type of technology. So.
Okay, interesting. So when Illumio first started, or several years ago, I should say, you were talking a lot about zero trust and segmentation at the time. And your platform has obviously evolved like many people's has. Talk to me about what you spotted in the market back a couple of years ago when you started really educating people about zero trust and segmentation, and why that's still as relevant today as breach containment is.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting, because if you look at the principle of zero trust, which there's a lot been written about it, but the fundamental is that you're shifting from trying to identify all the bad things and stopping them to sort of saying, well, let's change that and let's allow the good things through, or identify what the good things through and then let them pass, which means that you're effectively, and it's a great word, obfuscating a lot of the network so that the bad guys can't see it and they can't use it. You're forcing the traffic to go down a certain path, which you can then analyze and control in a much, much simpler way. So zero trust is really ideal for both IT environments, but OT environments as well. Because, the challenge we all face in the OT world is just with digital transformation, the keeping control of what's going where. So if you can apply those zero trust principles in that area, you're going to have a much better chance of protecting your most critical assets.
And you talk a lot about the critical assets, critical infrastructure. You're the director of critical infrastructure solutions. Some of the challenges that we hear about, they are the most threatened industry at the moment. Obviously, keeping the lights on, society safe, never been a more vital part of cybersecurity enforcement at the moment. Tell me about some of the things that have evolved over the last, let's say, 24 months, and the things that maybe keep you up at night now that didn't before. And then my second question, I guess, would be, what are you hopeful about as we evolve this industry that we're part of today, and what do you hope will happen in the rest of the year?
I think it's quite interesting because to a certain extent, the whole industry, let's just think about, manufacturing and electricity grids and the whole thing. So they're adopting Industry 4.0, which gives you a lot more efficiency. So it increases automation, it streamlines the supply chain and all those sort of things. But at the same time, the way that works is it needs more things to be interconnected. And as soon as you start to interconnect things, you're creating a challenge for that sort of thing. So, the problem is that the industry is transforming quicker than security is transforming within those organizations. And there's decisions being made that, I get questions say, well, the customer's done this. How do we secure it? And it's actually one of those things of, well, the reality is if they'd have done it differently in the first place, it would have been more secure. So I think the challenge we face is that we're now reversing into solving some of those problems. So that's the challenge we've created. The good news is that actually there's more collaboration happening between different organizations within the security industry to solve that problem. So things like adopting zero trust, and a lot of zero trust based technologies allow you to interact quite sensibly. And I think also there is one of the interesting things are things like the Cyber Resiliency Act we see in Europe, and there's the equivalent in the US and in Asia Pacific, which basically is saying if you're going to supply equipment like a wind turbine, it needs to be secure. And so some of the vendors are becoming more open to implementing security on that technology. And I think that's going to be the big shift, is that the equipment manufacturers who supply energy manufacturing, things like that, need to embed more standard type security into their products.
So you think actually that in compliance and regulation is actually going to be part of the fix to the future?
I think it will to a certain extent. The trouble is a lot of regulation doesn't keep up with technology, so it takes a lot longer to come up with that. And also the fact that you can't keep piling legislation onto organizations that don't have the resource to do it. So there needs to be a lot more support from central government, from the regulators to help organizations do it. So it needs to be maybe a bit more carrot and a bit less stick. I think that's the challenge. It's been all stick. It's like, if you look at the energy industry in North America, you've got NERC, you've got the DOE, you've got, state regulators, national regulators. And a lot of these guys going, I don't know, I don't know what I'm following.
Yeah.
And there's one of me, and how do I do it? So I think there is a certain amount of streamlining that needs to happen in a lot of that area. So
do you think, we talk a lot on the podcast about the responsibility of vendors like Illumio, like Armis, to not only educate and sort of raise awareness of these things, but also be responsible actors ourselves into the industry. So we are helping organizations evolve their projects, evolve their cybersecurity posture so that we are protecting for the future. Do you see that changed? Do you think there's more onus on us to be that more responsible nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is. I think the challenge with events like RSA is someone gets overhyped on things, So a few years ago, if you went round here, every booth would have zero trust written on it. This year, every booth's got AI written on it. And that's interesting, because what's happened is because the vendor marketing groups have sort of taken their eye off zero trust, people can now actually think about what it is and how to implement it without all the hype. So, so I think there is a certain amount of responsibility of vendors to cut through the hype a little bit. But, events like this are a challenge for that sort of thing. But I think, equally, if you look back over the last 30 odd years, it's been this flip flop between the sort of systems integrators leading the way, then the vendors led the way, and it's that sort of thing. We've got to get that balance right. And so, so there needs that three-way thing between customers, vendors, integrators, regulators, and there has to be much more cooperation between those groups really to help people, especially within critical infrastructure.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you mentioned AI. Yeah, everybody is talking about it. It's the word du jour at the moment. It's on every single booth. But I think we talk a lot about the use of AI, but also the threat of AI. And it's the speed of change that is going on daily. I think is the undercurrent of what everyone is talking about here. How do we keep ahead, or at least try and catch up on and like shorten the divide between the security threats? Do you see that being one of the biggest challenges we face in the future, trying to get ahead of where the technology is?
I think yes, I think it is. But I think so. There's an interesting sort of point around this. Is we did some research with Ponemon Institute about the cost of ransomware, and there's lots of really interesting stuff in there. And there was some frightening stats about 58% of organisations had to halt operations due to a ransomware attack. It's 2025. I mean, yeah, come on. But there was also research about ransomware being launched by RDP, and the number of weak passwords and unpatched systems, and there's so many basics that need to be fixed. And so, you look around the event and lots of shiny new posture management and third-party management. Yeah. Hey, everybody, let's do the basics. Let's get the foundational parts right. If you can restrict the view of AI into your organization by adopting zero trust to block off all those paths, if you block off all the high-risk ports, then it doesn't matter how smart AI is, it's not going to see all of those things. So I think the first thing everyone has to do is take a step back, identify where all those risks are, the weak passwords, and unpatch systems and fix them.
So what you're saying is actually go back to 20 years ago. It's an education thing. Yeah. You have to educate everybody within your organization to do the basics well.
Yeah. Stop spending so much money on the thing that's going to give you a fraction of a percentage improvement in your ability to stop an attack, and focus on fixing the things that when that attack happens mean that it's going to have a lesser impact.
Interesting. So what's coming up for Illumio for the rest of the year?
So we've just launched a new product called Insights, and what that it uses AI, but fundamentally what that's doing is that's exposing risk with it, or highlighting risk within the organization. So we have a data lake, and we use what they call a security graph. So if you think about a firewall has a list of rules, and it's a tabular, whereas a security graph, which isn't just unique to us, other people have security graphs as well. It builds a view of what's going on in your infrastructure, what all the nodes are and things like that. And so we can, what we call decorate, pull in data from Armis, from other vendors. We can pull in threat data. And so what that effectively then does is use all of that. We wrap some AI around it, and it shows you where you need to apply policy and mitigation and things like that. And so the functionality of that is going to expand. And that, really it's about making sure that we can change the behavior of the attackers. Because if I'm an attacker, I go to, ransomware is us, and I download a bit of ransomware. I go to somewhere else and download an exploit. I put it together and I launch it, and there's a good chance it's successful. If we can do the fundamentals, highlight where the risks are, mitigate all of that, that changes the way they have to do it. And so I think, the big thing over the next couple of years is really about making the attackers think differently, making their life a bit more difficult.
And if they want more information, where would they go?
Illumio.com. you can go. You can see a demo. We have the products we have at the moment works in the cloud. So with Azure, AWS, can be up and running in about 10 minutes. And so you can do, you can set yourself up. You can be a first adopter of that. It'll go GA for everyone, in a couple of months. But yeah, you can see that there's videos, there's all, demos, all that sort of thing there.
Well, look, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Rebecca. Good to see you again.